The air inside the celestial tribunal of Varelles hummed with a low, resonant frequency that vibrated through bone and thought alike. Towering crystalline spires spiraled toward a vaulted ceiling shimmering with captured starlight, casting prismatic patterns across the polished obsidian floor. Rows of robed judges, some insectoid, others avian, a few shimmering like liquid mercury, sat in concentric rings around the central dais, their multifaceted eyes fixed on the two figures standing beneath the judgment arch. At its center stood Corporal Jax Renner, human, battle-scarred, and profoundly out of place in his patched fatigues that still smelled faintly of ozone and burnt plasma. Beside him, barely reaching his shoulder, stood Lyra of the Shattered Grove, a green-skinned alien woman with hair like spun moonlight, cascading in silken waves down her back, and ears that tapered into delicate, leaf-like points. Her eyes, large and luminous, glowed faintly amber, betraying a mixture of fear, defiance, and something Jax couldn't quite name. Maybe hope, maybe fury. Jax hadn't signed up for this. Not when he'd signed his name to the Interstellar Accord, not when he'd shipped out to the volatile Rimward sectors, and certainly not when he'd crash-landed his scout shuttle on the war-torn moon of Keswick Prime. Back then, all he'd wanted was to survive long enough to call for extraction. Instead, he'd stumbled upon a hidden grove, half-buried under ash and shattered sky towers, and found Lyra unconscious beneath a collapsed archway. Her white hair matted with dust and blood, one arm twisted at an unnatural angle. He'd carried her for 3 days through irradiated canyons and past scavenger drones, rationing his last medpacks, talking to her even though she never woke, just to keep himself from going mad in the silence. He'd named her Ghost Leaf in his head, because she seemed too fragile to be real, like something conjured by the moonlight. Now, standing before the assembled might of the Varelian conclave, Jax learned that Lyra wasn't just any refugee. She was the last scion of House Vale, a noble bloodline nearly eradicated during the Cleansing Wars. And according to ancient Varelian law, specifically Clause 47 of the Covenant of Reciprocal Salvation, any being who saves the life of a bonded blood heir without expectation of reward becomes irrevocably tied to that heir's fate. In practical terms, that meant marriage. Not symbolic, not ceremonial. Full legal, spiritual, and biological union under Varelian jurisprudence. The kind that linked destinies, shared soul resonance, and, according to the stern-faced arbiter Thalvor, could not be undone without mutual consent or death. Jax nearly laughed. He'd been shot at by plasma cannons, eaten space rats the size of dogs, and once wrestled a malfunctioning combat drone in zero-G. But this was absurd. "You want me to marry her?" He'd blurted earlier during the pre-verdict hearing, earning a chorus of scandalized hisses from the gallery. "She doesn't even know my name. She knows your resonance," Thalvor had replied, voice echoing like stone grinding against stone. "Your biosignature has already intertwined with hers during the healing trance. The bond has begun. To sever it now would cause irreversible neural decay in both of you." Lyra had said nothing then. She'd only looked at him with those glowing eyes, unreadable as twin suns behind storm clouds. But now, under the weight of the final verdict, delivered not with gavels or shouts, but with a single chime from the heartstone at the chamber's center, she finally spoke. Her voice was soft, melodic, yet carried through the hall like wind through ancient trees. "I accept the verdict." Jax's stomach dropped. "You what?" She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "The law is clear. My life was forfeit. You restored it. Now our fates are entwined. To deny it would dishonor both our peoples." Her words were formal, practiced, but her fingers trembled slightly at her sides. The tribunal dissolved into murmurs. Some judges nodded approvingly. Others looked skeptical. A few even seemed amused. Jax felt like a lab rat caught in a cosmic joke. He wasn't a diplomat. He wasn't even a particularly good soldier, just stubborn enough to keep moving when others would have given up. And now he was being told he had to marry an alien princess he'd only known while she was unconscious? The ceremony, they explained, would take place in 3 solar cycles at the Grove of Echoing Vows, a sacred site on Varelles Prime, deep within the bioluminescent forests where House Vale once ruled. Until then, Jax and Lyra would be housed together in the diplomatic enclave, under the watchful eyes of Varelian honor guards and biomonitors that tracked their resonance compatibility. Jax groaned inwardly. Roommates with the woman he was supposed to marry? Great, just great. Their shared quarters were surprisingly comfortable, more like a luxury suite than a prison cell. Soft moss-carpeted floors, walls that shifted color with ambient mood, and a balcony overlooking a valley where floating lantern plants drifted like fireflies. Still, the tension between them was thick enough to choke on. For the first day, they barely spoke. Jax paced like a caged animal, muttering about regulations and interspecies treaties. Lyra sat by the window, braiding her white hair with vines that seemed to grow from nowhere, her expression distant. It was Jax who broke the silence. "Look," he said, stopping mid-pace. "I didn't save you two to get married. I just didn't want you to die alone in that crater." Lyra didn't look at him. On Varellis, no one dies alone. The grove sings for the fallen. But on Keswick, there was only silence. That silence frightened me more than the bombs. She finally turned, her amber eyes meeting his. "You gave me back my voice. Even if I couldn't speak, you spoke for me. That is not nothing." Jax blinked. He hadn't thought about it like that. He'd just been trying to stay sane. "Yeah, well, I talk too much when I'm scared." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Then perhaps we are both afraid." That night, over a meal of glowing fruit and steaming root broth, which Jax eyed suspiciously before taking a cautious bite, they began to talk. Really talk. He told her about Earth. Oceans that stretched forever, cities that never slept, the taste of real coffee. She spoke of the grove. Trees that remembered songs, rivers that flowed upward during eclipses, the way her people could hear the heartbeat of their planet through the soles of their feet. They argued about war. She blamed the human-led coalition for escalating the rimward conflicts. He countered that the Varelians had fired first when they destroyed the Helios relay. But they also laughed when Jax tried to mimic the Varelian greeting and nearly dislocated his jaw, or when Lyra accidentally activated his wristcom with a stray thought pulse and blasted static through the entire enclave. By the second day, the biomonitors began showing something unexpected. Their resonance levels were rising. Not just stabilizing, climbing. The Varelian scientists were baffled. Such rapid synchronization is unheard of outside of bonded pairs who've known each other for cycles. One whispered to another outside their door. Inside, Jax and Lyra were playing a Varelian strategy game involving floating stones and harmonic frequencies. Jax kept losing, but he was getting better. "You're cheating," he accused, grinning. "I am merely thinking 3 harmonies ahead," she replied, eyes twinkling. "You think in straight lines. I think in spirals. Spirals get you lost. Only if you refuse to trust the curve." He paused, stone hovering midair. "Is that philosophy or flirting?" She tilted her head. "Why not both?" The moment hung between them, fragile and bright. Then the alarms blared. Red light flooded the enclave. A synthesized voice announced, "Security breach in Sector Theta. Unauthorized vessel detected in upper atmosphere. All non-combatants to shelter." Jax was on his feet instantly, instincts kicking in. "Stay here," he ordered. Lyra stood too, her expression hardening. "I am not a non-combatant." Before he could argue, the wall exploded inward. Not with fire or shrapnel, but with vines. Thick, thorned, writhing tendrils that pulsed with sickly purple light. Through the smoke stepped figures clad in jagged armor, their faces hidden behind masks shaped like snarling beasts. The Scourge. Mercenaries. Fanatics who believed the old bloodlines like Lyra's were abominations that needed purging. "Lyra of Vale," their leader hissed, voice distorted. "Your blood ends tonight." Jax didn't hesitate. He shoved Lyra behind him and grabbed the only weapon he had, a ceremonial dagger from the tribunal, meant for symbolic use. Useless against energy rifles, but better than nothing. "Run," he growled. But Lyra didn't run. She raised her hands, and the very air around them shimmered. The vines recoiled as if burned. "This is my home," she said, voice ringing with power. "You have no right here." The Scourge opened fire. What followed was chaos. Jax moved like lightning, dodging, rolling, using the collapsing furniture as cover. He managed to disarm one attacker with a brutal kick, then used the stolen pulse pistol to blast another through the chest. But there were too many. One of them lunged at Lyra, blade raised. Jax threw himself in front of her. The blade sank into his side. Pain exploded through him, white-hot and nauseating. He fell to one knee, gasping. Lyra screamed. Not in fear, but in rage. Her eyes blazed like twin suns, and the room itself seemed to respond. The walls bloomed with thorns. The floor cracked open, swallowing 2 Scourge whole. The remaining attackers faltered, unnerved by the sudden surge of raw, planetary energy. Lyra knelt beside Jax, hands glowing with soft green light. "Hold on," she whispered. pressing her palms to his wound. "Don't you dare leave me now." Her healing energy surged into him, warm and electric. He could feel his cells knitting back together, but it wasn't just physical. He felt her fear, her determination, her affection. It flooded his mind like a tide, overwhelming and intimate. Their resonance spiked off the charts. The monitors outside shattered from the feedback. When the Varelian guards finally arrived, the Scourge were either dead or fleeing. Jax was pale but conscious, leaning against Lyra, who held him with surprising strength. The lead guard bowed deeply. "Lady Lyra, Corporal Renner, are you unharmed?" "Mostly," Jax grunted, wincing as he stood. "Though I think I'm allergic to near-death experiences." Lyra helped him up, her touch lingering. "You took a blade meant for me." "Yeah, well, figured you'd be more useful alive. You're the only one who knows how to work this damn fruit peeler." She laughed, a real, warm sound that made something in his chest tighten. "You are impossible. And you're stuck with me." The incident changed everything. The tribunal, already inclined to uphold the verdict, now saw Jax not as an outsider, but as a protector of Varelian heritage. The Scourge attack was traced back to a rival faction within the Conclave itself. Those who feared Lyra's return would destabilize the fragile peace. Suddenly, the marriage wasn't just tradition, it was political necessity. A symbol of unity between human resilience and Varelian legacy. But Jax didn't care about politics. He cared about the way Lyra brought him tea every morning without asking, how she'd started teaching him Varelian star chants, how she'd flinch when he made jokes about dying but then laugh anyway. And he cared about the dreams, shared now, thanks to their deepening bond, where they walked through glowing forests hand in hand, or stood on Earth's beaches watching sunsets neither of them had ever seen. The night before the ceremony, they stood on the balcony again, the valley below alive with drifting lanterns. "You don't have to go through with this," Lyra said softly. "I can petition the tribunal. Cite coercion. They might listen." Jax looked at her, really looked, at the green skin that shimmered in the moonlight, the white hair that caught the stars, the eyes that held galaxies. "Why would I say no?" he asked. "I've spent my whole life following orders, fighting wars I didn't believe in. But this feels like the first real choice I've ever made." She stepped closer. "And what is your choice?" He took her hand. It was cool, smooth, and thrummed with the same energy that now pulsed in his own veins. "My choice is you." She leaned her forehead against his. "Then let the stars bear witness." The next morning, the grove of echoing vows was alive with color and sound. Thousands had gathered, Varelians of every caste, human diplomats, even a few representatives from neutral systems. The path to the heart tree was lined with singing blossoms, their petals releasing fragrant mist with every note. Jax wore formal Varelian attire, deep blue robes embroidered with silver constellations, surprisingly comfortable. Lyra glowed in a gown of living vines and starlight, her hair braided with crystals that chimed softly as she walked. As they approached the heart tree, a massive, ancient being whose bark pulsed with slow, rhythmic light, the Arbiter Thalvor awaited them, holding the bonding chalice. The ritual was simple. Drink from the chalice, speak their vows, and press their palms to the tree. The rest would be done by the planet itself. But just as Jax took the chalice, a new sound cut through the air. Not of music, but of engines. High above, the sky darkened as a fleet of warships emerged from the clouds. Not Scourge, not Varelian, human, coalition insignia. A voice boomed from the lead vessel. "Corporal Jax Renner, you are hereby ordered to stand down. The union with alien entity Lyra Vale is in violation of Coalition Directive 9, prohibiting genetic entanglement with non-human species. Surrender the subject immediately." Jax's blood ran cold. Directive 9 was real, but it hadn't been enforced in decades. Someone wanted Lyra silenced. Someone high up. Lyra's hand tightened around his. "They will not take me," she whispered. Jax set down the chalice, looked at the ships, looked at the crowd, looked at Lyra. Then he did something no one expected. He laughed. "Tell me, Admiral," he called up, voice amplified by the grove's acoustics. "Does Directive 9 cover marriages ordained by planetary consciousness? Because I'm pretty sure this whole planet just adopted me as its son-in-law." The heart tree pulsed brighter. The ground trembled. From the forests, creatures emerged. Massive, six-legged guardians with eyes like molten gold, long thought extinct. They stood between the grove and the sky, roaring in unison. The coalition ships hesitated. Jax turned back to Lyra, took her hands and raised them high. "Let them try to tear us apart," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "But they'll have to go through an entire world to do it." The crowd erupted in cheers. The heart tree's light enveloped them both, weaving their shadows into one. The chalice floated between them, glowing with inner fire, and somewhere far above, the coalition fleet began to power down its weapons. But the real battle was only beginning, because if the coalition wanted Lyra dead, they wouldn't stop with a show of force. And if the scourge still lurked in the shadows, they'd strike again. Jax knew it, Lyra knew it, and as their fingers intertwined beneath the ancient tree, their hearts beating in perfect, resonant harmony, they also knew one thing for certain: they wouldn't face it alone. In the days that followed the interrupted ceremony, the grove of echoing vows became both sanctuary and fortress. The heart tree's light had not only sealed their bond in the eyes of Varelian law but had also awakened something deeper, an ancient symbiosis between Lyra's bloodline and the planet itself. Vareli's prime, long dormant since the cleansing wars, began to stir. Rivers changed course to nourish blighted lands. Crystalline blooms erupted overnight in the ruins of fallen cities. And whispers traveled on the wind, rumors that the last heir of House Vale had returned, not as a relic of the past, but as a living conduit of the world's reawakening. Jax, still adjusting to the strange hum in his bones, the resonance that now pulsed with every breath Lyra took, found himself both awed and unnerved. He could feel her emotions like distant music, joy as clear as chimes, sorrow like a low cello note. Sometimes, in his sleep, he dreamed in Varelian, a language he'd never studied, of star maps and forgotten rites. The scientists called it soul entanglement. Lyra called it becoming one root. Jax just called it weird, but in a good way. Their quiet moments grew more frequent. They'd sit beneath the heart tree at dusk, sharing stories or simply existing in silence that no longer felt empty. He taught her how to throw a proper punch, not with your arm, your hips, and she taught him how to listen to the planet's song. A low, rhythmic thrum beneath the soil that spoke of storms, migrations, and hidden threats. Once, during a training session with the Varelian Honor Guard, Jax accidentally triggered a resonance spike when Lyra was startled by a drone malfunction. The ground cracked open beneath the drone, swallowing it whole. The guards stared. Jax shrugged. "Guess the planet's got my back." But peace, as always, was fragile. A coded transmission arrived from a human source, encrypted, fragmented, but unmistakably urgent. It came from Lieutenant Mira Cho, Jax's former squadmate, presumed Kia during the Helios relay incident. The message was short: "They're lying to you. Directive 9 is a cover. They want her DNA. Project Chimera is real. Don't trust the coalition envoy." Jax showed the message to Lyra that night, under a sky streaked with auroras. Her face went still. "Project Chimera," she murmured. "I've heard whispers. A Black Bio initiative. They seek to splice Varelian regenerative genes with human aggression. Create soldiers who heal faster, feel less pain, obey without question." "They tried it before," Jax said grimly. "During the Outer Rim insurgency. Failed. People went mad. But if they've refined it..." He didn't finish. They both knew the implications. Worse still, the coalition had dispatched an observer, Ambassador Relic Voss, a smooth-tongued human diplomat with a smile that never reached his eyes. He arrived with gifts, apologies, and a proposal, a joint human-Varelian research initiative to study the bond for peaceful applications. He even brought a marriage license from Earth, to honor Corporal Renner's heritage. Lyra saw through it instantly. "He smells of synth flesh and lies," she whispered as they watched Voss charm the tribunal from their balcony. "His pulse doesn't match his words." Jax agreed, but they couldn't prove anything. And with the coalition fleet still orbiting, refusing their request would risk open conflict. So they played along while secretly preparing for betrayal. The twist came during the rescheduled bonding ceremony, this time held in the Hall of Whispering Pillars, a neutral site monitored by neutral system envoys. Voss stood among the dignitaries, smiling benignly. As Jax and Lyra approached the ceremonial dais, hand in hand, the air grew thick with tension. The chalice was filled not with nectar, but with purified heart tree sap, a substance said to finalize the soul link. But as Lyra reached for it, she froze. Her eyes widened. "The sap! It's tainted." Before anyone could react, she shoved Jax aside and knocked the chalice to the floor. It shattered, and where the liquid touched the stone, black veins spread like rot, hissing and smoking. Gasps filled the hall. Voss stepped forward, feigning shock. What is the meaning of this? An attack on our goodwill. It's you, Jax snarled, stepping between him and Lyra. You poisoned it. Voss's smile vanished. Don't be dramatic, Corporal. I merely ensured the bond wouldn't become irreversible. The Coalition cannot allow a human to be psychically enslaved by an alien entity. Enslaved? Lyra's voice was ice. You know nothing of our bond. You see only a weapon to be controlled. Then the lights went out. Not from sabotage, but from the planet itself. The pillars of the hall began to glow, their ancient carvings flaring with emerald light. The ground trembled. From the shadows, figures emerged. Not Scourge, not soldiers, but cloaked Varelians with eyes like smoldering coals. The Silent Grove, a sect thought extinct, sworn to protect the purity of Varelian blood. You have defiled the rite, their leader intoned, voice echoing unnaturally. The human must be severed. The air must be cleansed. Chaos erupted. Jax grabbed Lyra's hand. Run! They sprinted through collapsing corridors, pursued by both the Silent Grove and Voss's hidden security team. The hall became a labyrinth of shifting stone and living vines. At one turn, Lyra pressed her palm to a wall, and it bloomed open into a hidden passage. The grove remembers its children, she panted. They emerged into the Undercity, a network of tunnels beneath the capital, lit by bioluminescent fungi and humming with forgotten machinery. There, they found refuge with an unlikely ally, Core, a rogue bioengineer with 6 mechanical arms and a grudge against the Conclave. He'd once worked on early Chimera prototypes before defecting. You're both marked, Core told them, scanning their resonance signatures with a jury-rigged device. Voss implanted a tracer in the diplomatic gift he gave you, see? He pointed to a tiny scar on Jax's wrist, invisible to the naked eye. And the Silent Grove, they've activated the Purge chant. If they complete it, Lyra's connection to the planet will be severed, and she'll die. Jax slammed his fist against the wall. So we're trapped between fanatics, spies, and our own governments. Lyra placed a hand on his arm. Not trapped, guided. She closed her eyes, and the fungi around them pulsed in rhythm with her breath. Then she smiled. The planet shows me a path. There's a place, the Sunken Sanctum, deep beneath the shattered grove. It's where my ancestors stored the first seed. If we can reach it, we can awaken the full power of House Vale and break their control. The journey was perilous. They navigated flooded tunnels, avoided patrol drones, and once had to fight off a Chimera test subject. Half human, half Varelian, its green skin cracked with glowing seams, eyes vacant with obedience. Jax put it down with a plasma charge, but the sight haunted him. That could have been us, he muttered. Lyra squeezed his hand. But it wasn't, because we chose each other. At last, they reached the Sunken Sanctum, a cavernous chamber where roots thicker than starships coiled around a central dais. At its center floated the first seed, a pulsing orb of light, humming with primordial energy. As Lyra approached, the seed responded, tendrils of light wrapping around her like a long-lost embrace. Knowledge flooded her, rituals, histories, warnings. She gasped. The bond, it's not just between us. It's a key. The planet chose you, Jax. Not because you saved me, but because you saw me. Not as a princess. Not as a weapon. Just me. Tears welled in her eyes. And that's why they fear us. Suddenly, the chamber shook. Voss and the Silent Grove had found them. But this time, Jax and Lyra were ready. As Voss raised a neural disruptor, Lyra spoke a single word in the old tongue. The roots surged. Vines erupted from the walls, binding the intruders. The first seed flared, and a wave of energy shot through the planet, shattering every Chimera implant in the system, disrupting Coalition comms, and silencing the Purge chant mid-verse. Voss screamed as his tracer burned out. The Silent Grove collapsed, their fanaticism undone by the raw truth of the planet's will. In the aftermath, the Conclave was forced to reckon with its own corruption. Voss was extradited to a neutral tribunal. The Chimera program was exposed and dismantled. And the bond between Jax and Lyra was declared sacred, not just by law, but by the living world itself. Yet even as peace returned, new questions loomed. The Coalition still watched. The Scourge still plotted. And deep in the stars, other ancient bloodlines stirred, sensing the awakening of Vareli's. One evening, as they stood on the rebuilt balcony, now overlooking a city blooming with life, Jax turned to Lyra. So what now? She leaned into him, her white hair catching the twin moon's light. Now, she said, we build something new, not just for us, for everyone who's been torn apart by fear. He kissed her forehead, feeling the steady thrum of her heart sink with his. Just promise me one thing. What? No more poison chalices. She laughed, the sound weaving into the planet's song. Only if you promise no more crash landing on war zones. Deal. And as the lantern plants drifted upward like wishes set free, two souls, human and alien, scarred and hopeful, stood together, not as verdict-bound strangers, but as partners in a story far from over. Years flowed like the reawakened rivers of Varelli's prime, steady, nourishing, and full of unexpected turns. The bond between Jax Renner and Lyra of House Vale, once forged in desperation and sealed by cosmic law, deepened into something richer than either had imagined. A quiet, resilient love that weathered storms and bloomed in sunlight alike. They never returned to the rigid scripts of soldier and scion. Instead, they carved a life from the raw materials of hope, humor, and hard-won peace. Their home was built not in the gleaming spires of the capital, but on the edge of the shattered grove, now simply called the Renewed Grove, where the heart tree's roots cradled a modest dwelling woven from living wood and starlight glass. It was a place where human coffee mugs sat beside Varelian resonance bowls, where earth jazz played softly alongside the planet's ambient hum, and where laughter echoed more often than alarms. And oh, the laughter came most often from their children. They had three daughters and two sons, each a miracle of biology and belonging. The first, Sarah, inherited Lyra's luminous amber eyes and Jax's stubborn chin. She could calm a storm with a song and once talked a rogue sky serpent into becoming the family's pet. The twins, Kaelin and Mira, named in secret defiance of old superstitions, for the friend who'd saved them, were green-skinned with streaks of copper in their white hair, and possessed a telepathic link so strong they finished each other's sentences, even across rooms. Then came Ren, quiet and observant, who could hear the whispers of ancient stones, and little Ello, the baby, who glowed faintly when she laughed and had already tamed a flock of floating lantern plants into loyal companions. Jax, who once thought he'd die alone in some forgotten crater, now found himself knee-deep in chaos every morning, chasing toddlers who could sprout vines from their fingertips, mediating disputes over who got to ride the six-legged guardian hound, and trying and failing to teach them Earth's swear words without Lyra catching on. She always did, and she'd just smile, shake her head, and say, "They'll learn better words from you, my love, like please, and I'm sorry, and your turn." He'd grumble, but his eyes would crinkle at the corners, the same way they did every time he watched her move through their garden, barefoot on moss, humming to the blossoms that leaned toward her like sunflowers. The galaxy didn't forget them. Diplomats came. Scholars asked for interviews. Occasionally, old enemies stirred. But the mere mention of the Rennervale household was enough to make most think twice. Not because they were feared, but because they were respected. Jax had retired from active service, but his name carried weight. The human who'd chosen love over orders, loyalty over legacy. Lyra, meanwhile, became the voice of the Grove, not as a ruler, but as a bridge. She helped draft the Concord of Shared Breath, a treaty that recognized interspecies bonds as sacred across 12 star systems. Children like theirs were no longer anomalies, they were symbols of a new era. On their 20th anniversary, the entire grove threw a celebration. Bioluminescent kites filled the sky. The heart tree bloomed in colors never before seen. Their children performed a play, badly, reenacting the day Jax rescued Lyra, though they insisted he'd tripped over a root and dropped her twice. Jax pretended to be offended. Lyra laughed until tears streamed down her cheeks. Later, as the stars wheeled overhead and the children slept curled among the roots like saplings, Jax and Lyra sat on their balcony, hands entwined, silence comfortable as an old coat. "Do you ever miss Earth?" she asked softly. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But not enough to leave this." He squeezed her hand. "You know, I used to think love was something that happened to other people. In songs, in stories, not to guys like me. And now?" she asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Now I think love is waking up every morning and choosing to stay, even when your kid turns your boots into nesting boxes for glowworms." She laughed. "That was Ello. She said they looked lonely, right? Well, tell her next time to ask before redecorating." They sat in companionable quiet, watching the lantern plants drift like dreams given form. The resonance between them no longer felt like a cosmic obligation. It felt like home. Not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs, messy, loud, tender, and alive. Years turned to decades. Their children grew, married, and brought grandchildren who called Jax Papa Star and Lyra Grandroot. The house expanded, not with walls, but with branches, rooms growing like fruit on the boughs of their living home. Jax's hair turned silver, then white, but his eyes still sparkled with mischief. Lyra's skin remained green, her hair luminous, though time etched gentle lines around her eyes, each one a memory, a laugh, a shared sunrise. On the day Jax turned 93, he woke before dawn, kissed Lyra's forehead, and walked barefoot into the grove. She followed as she always did. They sat beneath the heart tree, now twice its original size, its bark etched with the names of their family across generations. "I think I'm ready," he said, not with fear but peace. She nodded, resting her head against his. "The planet will sing you home." He smiled. "Save me a spot in the roots?" "Always." When the sun rose, Jax Renner was gone. His body returned to the soil, his resonance woven into the very breath of Varelli's. The grove fell silent for a full cycle. Then, at dawn, a new sapling sprouted beside the heart tree, its leaves edged in silver, its blossoms faintly humming an old earth lullaby. Lyra lived many more years, telling stories of the human soldier who'd carried her through ash and became her forever. She never remarried. She didn't need to. Her love had been complete. And when her time came, she simply lay down beneath the silver-leaf tree, her white hair mingling with its roots, and whispered, "Take me home." The planet answered. Their children say that on quiet nights, if you listen closely, you can still hear them, laughing together in the rustle of leaves, in the chime of crystal blossoms, in the steady, loving pulse of a world that learned, through them, how to heal. And so, against all odds, in a universe of war and wonder, Jax and Lyra did what few believed possible. They built a life not of grand battles or galactic fame, but of small, daily joys, of shared meals, scraped knees, bedtime stories, and hands held through every storm. They loved fiercely, raised kind hearts, and left behind a legacy not written in treaties, but in the laughter of their grandchildren beneath a sky full of stars. They lived, they loved, and yes, they lived happily ever after.